Welcome to Ralph Beuthan from Myongi University in Seul.
Okay. Thank you very much for invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here, and it was very inspiring. There's just one problem now coming up. I'm in a way that was a kind of intellectual overkill. I'm a bit exhausted, and I'm afraid you too. So I will try to stick to the time slot, but it might be hard for me. So I prepared a kind of PPT. That's not really a PPT, but it should help me to control the time. So I will just read this, what you can see. It's very boring for you, so usually I have to talk a bit more, but there is no time. I hope it will work. So what I want to do is just to talk about a bit about my idea or project of media philosophy, and my approach is, in a broad sense, an anthropological approach and a historical approach. Anthropological approach in a very broad sense, I mean, I combine or connect these issues or my questions with the question of what is human or what is human being. That's interesting for me. So now here's the historical approach. When I look back into the history, I can see the definition or the way of defining or understanding human being was always connected with the question, what is human? So what is human? What is nature? What is God? And there is a kind of framework. And exactly around 1800, so close to the increasing of industrialization, we can find there is a kind of crisis. Exactly 1800, the people discover that there is the notion of machine, and suddenly there is something what is not only a tool or an instrument, there is something coming up what could be very dangerous for human being, could be a threat. This is a very early discovery, so 1800. And we know the story. It's an ongoing story. Then there is Marx and so on and so on. Ongoing story till today. So machines could be dangerous. And I want to follow a bit this line to give a framework for what I want to do and what I want to conceptualize. So looking back into the 20th century, so at the first glance, no need just talk about literature or science. Looking back into the 20th century, we can see some very famous and great, interesting science fiction movies. And it would be interesting to talk about these movies, but no time. Just focus on the idea that there is a tension between machine and human. Yeah, a tension between human and machine. And there is an ongoing story that this tension, there is just one solution, fighting. And one of these sides have to win the game. And the story is over. We might say there is a turning point, a crisis. When we talk about Blade Runner, there is the point that, you remember, I'm thinking about the question, what is human? And it becomes a problem to define what is human. And this is so interesting in Blade Runner. Yeah, we can't define anymore what is human. There's the idea that we can't distinguish anymore human and machine. That's the main point in Blade Runner, and that there might be a kind of machine, androids, they could be, this is a quote, more human than human. Very interesting. So more human than human, in other words, Superman. Yeah. And this is exactly the end of the story, Ghost in the Shell animation movie, very fascinating. It's so when you love Matrix, you will love this even more. This is earlier than Matrix, and Matrix learned a lot from this Japanese anime movie. Okay, and what is the point here? Yes, there is no difference anymore. So human becomes machine. There is a kind of hybrid, yeah? So we uploaded our capacity into the data world. In the technology or technological driven world, there is no real difference anymore. That's the point. So there is a dramatic story, fighting between human and machine, and the end of the story is we are the same, a kind of hybrid. Okay, now another approach, a non-dramatic approach, in a way more prosaic. So when we look back and just a few names, the list could be even longer, but everybody, I guess, know the most of them. here, so Jacques Lacan, Merleau-Ponty, Derrida, Clarke, David Chalmers, Clarke was mentioned already, Merlin-Donald, just a few of them, it could be more. What we can see here in very different areas, there are very different disciplines, we can find an idea that there is not really a dramatic situation between human and machine. The point is to find out how they are connected, and they are connected in a way. So it's a small difference. It's not just a drama, it's just a question how these things are intermingled, how these entities belong together. So it would be for sure interesting to talk about all of these guys, but no time. The point is now just to think this is a different approach, and I want to try to follow this line. No drama, no fighting, just figuring out what is connected here. And so I will try to find a new approach. That means first a non-dramatic approach, and I think I have to, or I will try to map some conceptual challenges. Okay, starting with a general proposal, just claiming here, not really arguing, a redifferentiation of the conceptual field and investigating new concepts. I guess this is the task. So what I mean is instead of de-differentiation, so the idea of the fusion of high-tech and human beings, just a kind of hybrid and this idea of more human than human, Blade Runner, being Superman. So just the idea of put the things together. I guess we have to overcome this simple way of thinking. So figuring out against the differences or the conceptual differences we have to deal with when we try to think on this line. So we have to rediscover and re-evaluating the categorical differences. So first point, second point, instead of claiming a monocausal relation, I guess we have to re-emphasize interactivity and interrelation. Yeah, I know this is that's boring for you, everybody says this, but maybe there are some problems. Okay, so what do I mean with redifferentiation? So revealing the categorical complexity or differences. Following the idea of the human plugged-in activity, this is something what Merlin-Donald mentioned. I should give a word about this. So Merlin-Donald, I mentioned him before, is doing cognitive sciences and psychology and something like this, and anthropology. And he has the very interesting idea that, yeah, this is already, everybody believes this, that our intelligence and our brain activity, our cognitive processes are developed in co-evolution with technical processes. That's clear. But the interesting point is that he argues that these technology or the technical-driven processes shapes our minds, so that the brain architecture is shaped by the technology. Yeah, it's not just we have our capacity and we can plug in or not. Now, just because we are plugged in, first we develop our intelligence. We have this high-level intelligence now because we are plugged in and not because we have a great brain activity without technology. First, and this technology impact shapes our brain. This is an interesting point. So this is a quote from Merlin-Donald, plugged in. But this is a bit suggestive. So following the idea of the human plugged-in activity, we might presuppose that the human-machine relation is a kind of hybrid identity. Yeah, that's an interesting point. So that means two entities of the same ontological level, so some two technological devices are connected and build together another entity, but still on the same ontological level, like a hybrid motor. Yeah, two technologies, we put them together and have a new kind of motor, hybrid motor. Yeah, that's the idea, but this is maybe not really true. So, and what I want to argue for, or what I want to follow, is the idea of a non-reductive approach. So we can't comprise the whole relation by using just technical or physical concepts. Yeah, just this technical way of speaking will not cover this, what we have to cover when we want to understand these relations. So, and there is an example, and this is the reason why I why I give this funny title from Superman to Metafriend. This is a bit more a joke than very, very clever, but it's maybe a helpful joke. So Superman is the idea, just hybrid identity, just put two things together and then it fits together. And there is maybe a kind of lie or a trick in this idea. Metafriend might be a bit more complex. So what is a metafriend? So when we still follow the line of being plugged in, we sometimes plugged in the so-called social networks such as Facebook or others. As a half Korean, this is an interesting example for me, social networks, because as far as I know, the Koreans invented social networks. The first social network was Seul in Korea, so 1999 or something. Okay, I heard this. I'm not sure if this is true, but it could be interesting. Good, so plugged in social networks, we sometimes might believe that we have not only friends via the social network, moreover, we might think that the social network itself is our friend. Yeah? So, and the ethnologist Daniel Miller analyzed this phenomenon that people sometimes say something like, Facebook is my friend, or I love Facebook. I think nobody will say it here, but it could be. It could be. So he argues that Facebook is not literally considered as a person, but it has, in a way, the function of a friend. This is an important point. It has a function of a friend. So, in a way, what is a friend? You have a problem, you call him at night, and he will give you an answer. Yeah? And you can do this with Facebook. You feel very bad in the middle of the night, you use Facebook, you write something, and you will get a feedback, something, a response. So, in a way, it works or functions like a friend. Okay, although it is not a real person, it works like a friend. For this kind of friend, something that what functions as a friend, Miller coins the term metafriend. Okay, what can we learn from the idea of metafriend? The question is not to what extent it might be a real friend or not. The question is, what does it mean concerning the former dramatic opposition human-machine and the idea of Superman? The idea of metafriend, I guess, sensibilizes us for the need of new categorical forms. So, using social networks means more than using a hammer or a steam engine. It's not just a technical device for producing material entities or improving or substituting organic functions. So what is it? Yeah, here are some ontological issues. It is neither just a thing, in a way, or an object, nor a person, neither a legal or moral agency, nor an embodied subject. It's something very strange. So what might be the conceptual framework to analyze this kind of technical-driven entities which are neither machines or persons? And my proposal is, when we have the case that using a kind of technology means at the very same time becoming a person, a social identity, being and presenting yourself as a person, interacting, and experiencing yourself as a person, then I would call this technological-based entity a medium rather than a machine. I tried to find another concept. I'm not sure what you're thinking about this. I think it's necessary that we have to distinguish media and machines. That's the point. So the concept, so following this line, the concept of medium comprises the concept of person and intersubjectivity. So when we talk about machine, that's not necessary. But when we talk about medium, then we have to, this implies the ideas or the concepts of persons and intersubjectivity. So this is my attention. So now some consequences of this post-machine or media age. Yeah? We are maybe not just talking about post-human, maybe about a post-machine area too. That could be interesting. So some consequences, methodological or metaphysical, starting with the methodological aspects. I think it's interesting or necessary to have a kind of phenomenological-based categorical analysis. So, I mean, referring to the forms of practice and usage of media instead of deducing the properties by presupposing an assumed essence that might determine the practice. So I would argue against a media a priori, as in the same way as a technological a priori. I want to argue against this. In short, bottom up, not top down. Yeah, there is no essence. We have to observe the ways of practice. But we have not only to describe this, it's not just an empirical issue, we have to find the conceptual consequences then, or to discover or to invent them in a way. It doesn't matter if you say inventing or discovering, for me, no difference. Okay, and second, a revision and recalibration of the categorical orders or rules. So what is challenging here? Overcoming or reconceptualizing accustomed distinctions such as nature, culture, or technological matter of facts on one hand, and normativity and interpersonal relations on the other hand. So overcoming this without reductionism. This is challenging. And I emphasize this. So I think more or less many of us might agree with this, yes, we don't want to have a dualism, yes, but what is the next step? And sometimes I hear something, yes, nature, culture, it's over. But what we are doing sometimes, we try to overcome this kind of dualism by making a very reduced kind of monism. That means culture, so just technology makes everything. I don't believe in this. Yeah. I really believe we have to keep the concept of nature too. We have to combine this. We have to see what's going on here. We need both concepts. We cannot only argue from one side. So that's a bit my claim. So now, I hope I'm still more or less in time. Metaphysical aspects, coming more or less to the end. Following the recent discussion of philosophy of mind and phenomenological-based media philosophy, so Yvonne mentioned these things already, the idea of body or embodiment becomes a key function of conceptualizing the human-media relation. However, although the idea is very important, it remains one-sided. It suggests, again, a one-way approach by analyzing the reality of media as an extension or projection of embodied performances. Still one-sided. There is a problem. If we really believe, and I would like to discuss this even more, if we really believe this is just a kind of extension, I'm not sure about this. So what kind of reality is media? Presupposed that it is constituted both by technological matter of facts as well as human practice and normativity. In a metaphysical approach, I assume that we rather have to focus on the interrelation than on the relata. It will be a particular challenge to conceptualize the interrelation without hypostasizing the relator and falling back into a one-sided approach. Okay, that might be easy. Moreover, the fact that we have to conceptualize something what interlinks and comprises, simply speaking, the organic and the anorganic world is still challenging. Although I am emphasizing the practice and the notion of interactivity, I will not suggest that we have to deal with two agents of the same ontological order. My assumption is that the concept of media is characterized by a fissure or fraction. That means by an irreducible alterity that opens the fields of practice, acting, and interacting. Yeah, this is a problem for me, but even really challenging, very interesting when you use the term agencies. You have already some agencies, and I ask myself, what kind of agencies these are? It makes sense, it's very suggestive, but I'm not sure if these are the same things what we are talking about. This is a problem for me. Okay, and I think there is an alterity, and this is important, and I think it's crucial for the term or the notion of media. So, yeah, I just mentioned this. The idea of an opening fissure might have a Derriderian sound, and it's not a problem. Why not? The crucial point is that the alterity we have to face in the case of media is, so to speak, not beyond the organism or the subjectivity as a kind of separable anorganic environment or basement. It is furthermore a withdrawing center of the organic subjectivity itself. We cannot split this, the bad side or the machine side, and so on. We have to find a complex entity here, or we have to figure out a complex entity. And I think organisms' subjectivity, and maybe something like a self, and I have to confess, I still believe in this, but when this concept should work, then we have to bring these things inside of the concept, these strange alterity. It is the center of the concept of self, and it is this already for a long time. We have to remember this. The concept of self is much more complicated than we use it here sometimes. Okay, this by the way. So the center is not directly given as an empirical object, that's clear. But even though it's not an object, it is more than darkness. I emphasize this in opposite to the German media philosopher Mersch, who is talking about so-called negative media philosophy. And there is something, a kind of darkness. And I'm not agree with this. So it is not just darkness. It is given by yielding different kinds of structures. It opens the field of acting, producing, and interacting. And the openness, and that's a point, maybe strange, but I think it's important. The openness is always articulated or formed. It's not somewhere. The openness is articulated, is structured. It's given as a structure to us, not as an object, not as a thing, not as an empirical thing in an easy way. So in this, we might say both traditional and transcultural approach, we have to comprehend the articulation or structures without hypostasizing them. That's the point. This is a methodological point. Yeah, transcultural, just by the way, so the idea or the way of dealing with these entity, what I call media, yeah, without hypostasizing them, this thing, we might have ideas of hints when we follow the Taoism, Buddhism, Hegel, Nietzsche, Deleuze. The list is very long. There's this, doesn't matter which you like anyway. The point is we have to do this. We have to understand the articulation without hypostasizing them. Good. How can we investigate media as something that is rather giving than given? In this metaphysical concern, I propose to follow a double-tracked method, and this is, I guess, my last point. Beside the mentioned phenomenological approach of describing the common media practice, such as media studies already are doing, and it's very important, I guess. Beside this, we have to follow the enactive approach of media art by using and reopening the ways of articulation. Yeah, there is a double-track method, so in a way the ordinary way of using or the ordinary practice and this very special practice of media art, of finding new rules, opening the things. And I think we need both to understand what is media, yeah, because it's not just a simple entity. It is given to us in articulated practices, but these practices is not fixed in fixed rules, so we need both. The ordinary thing and this opening process, such as media art is doing. Okay, and for sure in this concern, my project might be linked to the Metabody project. I think it's time is over, so instead of a summary, I will just emphasize, whenever you have questions and comments, please send it to my email address. Thank you.